I'm sorry.
Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, where faith, community, and ministry intersect in the unique context of smaller congregations. I'm your host, Tony Marr, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two men who are convinced they're a little bit more talented than I am.
That is right. I'm Robert Kell, one of those supposedly more talented guys, co-host and fellow small church leader. Together, we're here to explore the challenges, triumphs, and inspiring stories within the tight-knit communities that make up our smaller churches.
And I'm Bruce Montgomery, the one here to bring even more to the table than these two and offer a unique perspective to our conversation.
So whether you believe this talent hierarchy or not, you're in for a treat. If you're a pastor, a church member, or just curious about the world of leadership, you're in the right place.
Each episode, we dive into topics that matter to you, from innovative ministry ideas to navigating the unique dynamics of a smaller congregation.
So grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and let's journey together through the wonderful tapestry of small church life.
This is the Small Church Podcast.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas everywhere you go. Merry Christmas, guys.
Woohoo! It is Christmas time.
It is officially Christmas time. For those of you that have waited until after Thanksgiving to begin your Christmas celebrations, you can now start celebrating. Deck the halls, turn the music to the Christmas station, pull out the decorations, and wish everyone that you meet a very Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it is a great time. I know that, Tony, you're more of a November 1st type of...
I am. I'm a real Christian.
So what am I? I started earlier than that.
Yeah, Bruce, you start like December 26th, and you work it back around for the next year.
Hey, welcome to the Small Church Podcast. I am Tony Marr, along with Bruce Kell and
Robert Montgomery here.
Robert Montgomery. Yeah, Robert Kell
Montgomery.
and Bruce Montgomery is...
I won't count.
What's that, Bruce?
I won't count.
You count. So Bruce is not here in studio with us. Bruce is live via Bluetooth from home. He's in much better company than I am this morning. And Bruce, we hope that you're doing well.
I started to say live from Kingsport. It wouldn't. I was like, I don't know how to transition there. It's a small church.
Bruce, how are you this morning?
I'm doing okay. Carol's a little under the weather, and that's why I'm home with her. But I'm doing fine and enjoying the Christmas music that you've been singing for us.
Yeah, in full transparency, this is our second take this morning. We got about 9.5 minutes into the show and realized that our recording software was not recording anything. And so we had to stop and start it over and get going.
We had to stop, collaborate, and listen, and kind of go back and do it all again.
That really ties in so well
to one of the segments.
One of the segments that we're doing. That was great. That was a great segue, but we're not ready for that segment yet.
I work hard. I work hard to throw in thoughts that have nothing to do, but everything to do with what's happening in the podcast.
It creates magic. It really does. And speaking of creating magic, we want to thank all of our listeners because we crossed a major threshold this past week. The Small Church Podcast crossed the threshold of 1,000 listeners.
Woo-hoo!
So we now have over 1,000 listeners. If this is your first time listening to us, you may very likely be listener number 1,001. And you also, the way this has gone so far, may very well be our last listener.
I mean, I two more zeros than I thought you would have said. I mean, I'd have thought my mom, your mom, both of our spouses.
My mom has never listened to this show. Not one time.
My mom doesn't know what a podcast is. So,
But it's a huge milestone for us. This is our 32nd
absolutely.
episode of the podcast. And to have over 1,000 people that tune in to listen to the show, we want to say thank you for that, for being a part of that. We know that we have listeners from 30 different states, 7 different countries, listening on various different platforms from all different demographics, and checking out those analytics has been exciting to see, and we would love to catch up with some of you and find out how you found out about our show, why you tune into our show, because frankly, we don't know, and we just want to say thank you. 1,000 people in 32 episodes is very, very exciting for us, and I want to go ahead and say, while you're at it listening to the show, go ahead and subscribe. Whatever you're listening to, maybe you already subscribe again. and tune in every week because we have a really good time and we hope that you're getting something out of it.
Listen to it on like 3 different streaming services. Listen to it on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon. I mean, just whatever you have options. Google. Just subscribe on all of those. Listen to it like 4 times a week. That would be amazing.
That would be really good for us. Yeah.
Hey, so it's Christmas time, and as you said, and I say this a lot. I love movies. I love film. I know you do too, Tony and Bruce. I know you especially like. I think you like Christmas movies, Bruce. I don't know if you like any other movie, but you love Christmas movies, and so
Bruce, do you watch Hallmark Christmas movies?
All the time.
All we need to know.
So I may have to this year. So like a few weeks ago, my wife was watching the news, which is my least favorite thing to watch. But she was watching the news and she said, "Hey, they are offering a thing where you can get paid to watch Christmas movies." And I was like, "Well, I'm definitely signing up for that. And if it's on the news, it must be real." So
is that a full-time job?
It's like a $2,500 job for 25 movies throughout Christmas. And so you find out kind of right here at the beginning. It's weird. They don't tell you like until like December's already going. But yeah, you plow through 25 movies over about 3 weeks and you get $2,500, and that would be awesome. And you get like free Netflix and several other streaming services for a year.
How do we sign up for that?
Honestly, I can text you the link. I don't even know.
Please do it. Now we're going to grow to 2,000 listeners because everyone's going to want this link here.
Everybody's going to want the link.
Hey, little small known fact that talking about Hallmark Christmas movies, I'm actually in a Hallmark Christmas movie several years ago. Bruce, you've seen it, right?
I did. We watched it twice.
Yeah. Several years ago, they did a movie, a Hallmark Christmas movie called Christmas at Dollywood, and they did a casting call for extras. And so we took all the kids down, spent a whole day down in the park filming with Winnie from Wonder Years was the star of that, and had a great time. And we actually got in a few scenes walking through, and yeah, I've tried to get the movie poster with us in it, and I can't find it anywhere. So if any of our listeners out there have Christmas at Dollywood, the movie poster, would love you to send that our way. I don't think it exists, but maybe we've got some
that was probably
Etsy
direct
people out
to
there.
cable there, Tony. I don't even. Yeah, no, that's good. No, I don't. I've not been in a movie. I was. I helped. I mean, I was like camera 2 for a feature film that was fun, but I've never been in a movie. So there you go. That's awesome.
So I've been in a movie.
I saw a poster.
You're getting paid to watch movies.
For that the other day.
You saw what, Bruce?
I saw going through things on the internet. I saw that movie. I forgot that was the name of it, but I saw it listed and almost watched it again. That'd been 3 times.
3? That'd be, yeah. You're my biggest fan.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so guys, we are talking about Christmas as we have turned the page into December and looking at what Christmas means for the church and Christmas traditions in the small church. And so I just want to kind of pick your guys' brain a little bit as guys who have been in ministry for many, many years. How does your church typically celebrate Christmas?
Bruce, you want to go?
When I first was preaching, the first church I had, we were in a small community, and no one had Christmas Eve services. It wasn't in that, and so we did it, and we found a lot of success with it, and making that doing that help kept it in the center part of what we're doing throughout the season, and we were able to get new people who come in and visit with us on that. We felt more of a realness I'm looking for words here. We felt I think more about the season by doing that than we ever had before as a church, and so I think that there's something about gathering and having that special service that makes it a lasting thing for children if they stay up that late, but for families and planning for it, anticipation, and then going to it. Usually we had standing room only, and even in the bigger churches that I've served, we've had standing room only for that. So I think that the Christmas Eve service is something that is very worthwhile and has its own kind of energy to it.
Yeah, I was really surprised that for me growing up out on the West Coast, my home church, we did a big Christmas celebration every year that was a big community event. It was a Broadway style production and would sell tickets that we would give tickets away, but I think they eventually started selling them for like $1 just because people were getting handfuls of them and then not showing up, and then we'd have empty seats. But we would do 6, 7 shows over the course of the 2 weeks leading up to Christmas, and we would have 20, 30,000 people that would come out to this show every year, and it was a big deal. That as a kid,
You're talking about Central?
Central Christian in Las
Love
Vegas,
it so much, man. That church, literally, it is an inspiration for one of the biggest kind of passions God still has in mine and my family's life of just inside of the church and serving in our area. Love it. So, yeah, if you've not seen, you should go online and watch. Even now, you should go to YouTube and watch Central Christmas because it's amazing. The first one I ever saw, they literally flew Santa Claus in from the back of the church.
Yeah.
Which, that church isn't tiny. I mean, it's probably the size of...
It's a pretty big church.
It's like, 200 of our churches combined.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we actually, the Santa flying in, we did that one of the years that I was in the program, and flew in. Our pastor actually played Santa and flew him in and overhead, and it was pretty cool. And me and my best friend Matt, we started off having roles in the production, which was really exciting. I think we were freshmen, sophomores in high school. And we started off with roles, and then by the time we actually got to the week of production, we had been reduced to like third stagehands because they just didn't want us a part of the production at all. And our job, our sole job, was there was a part in the show, the grand finale, the big final scene, the big culmination of everything that was happening, where it was going to snow. Now, this was the early 90s, okay? So now every show you go to, they create the fake snow. This was a big deal back then, and especially in Las Vegas, where it doesn't snow very often in Las Vegas. And so to create this magical moment for thousands of people that are sitting in the church auditorium, for it to snow on them, and our job is I was stage left, Matt was on stage right, and all we had to do was pull on these ropes ever so gently that would rock this big piece of fabric that held this fake snow in it, and it would gently, twinkle down in this beautiful, majestic, peaceful moment of snowing in the desert to create this wonderful. This snow was a metaphor for Jesus coming to earth as the snow drift. That's not true at all. But
as you're setting this up, my assumption is though it ended up looking more like one of those Insta reels where the snow comes off the top of the roof and like just pounds people in the head.
So it was opening night, and the show has gone great. It's a packed house, standing room only, and way to ruin my story there, Robert. And
I'm hoping I'm wrong.
We're waiting for our moment, and we start, and I'm looking at Matt, he's looking at me, and we're so excited because this is our big moment. Even though we can't be seen, we had to wear all black because we're off on the sides of the stage, and we'd practiced this a dozen times before, and now it's opening night, and the adrenaline just kicked in, and we had the only recorded blizzard ever in the history of Las Vegas took place on opening night, and that was the one and only night that we were able to operate the snow effect machine. Then after that, we got delegated from third stagehands back to green room participants.
filling up the water jug in the corner.
Yep, that's all that we got to do.
Those machines, though, were crazy because my oldest son, when he was 11, I think, was 11 or 12, was in Charlie Brown at a small community theater where we live, and he came through, and they had one of those things where they had built this, and they kind of gently pull the thing, and so Landon's standing on stage, and the director's backstage pulling the little thing to get the little snow to trickle out on Charlie Brown as he's walking through, and Landon, it was really fun. He got to play Charlie Brown. It was a great experience. We loved that show. It was a lot like the yearly TV show that we all loved to watch, and they did that performance live in a theater thing, and he's walking through and the machine fell on his head. It fell out of the so those things are dangerous, man. They need to stop that type of production and stuff. Like, it's just too scary.
Yeah, people were screaming, yelling, running out of the place, but they couldn't see because their eyes were filled with fake snow, and there's 3 feet of snow all over the auditorium ground because it all just fell in one big bunch, and
It's Snowmageddon.
we got fired. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing about, kind of those Christmas traditions in a small church, I don't. I think I think the thing is we're part of a network of churches, and so at my campus, and so we're one of 3 churches. We're kind of in the steps right here, late 2023 when we're recording this. We're in the process and in the steps of got a couple other areas we're looking at. One that's already starting to have some small group meetings and things. So we're 3 campuses looking at a 4th and potentially a 5th over the next 6 to 9 months, and in that space, like it's hard to kind of, so we don't have like these crazy traditions because we've all kind of adapted the kind of the identity of the other campus. So even though we're in our own communities and do our own things, we kind of have a lot of that same rhythm. And I know, I mean, I'm looking. You have a great roadmap for us, and so I'm gonna hold off on the Christmas Eve thing till kind of we get on the other side of some other stuff. But that's I mean, we don't have a ton of traditions. I mean, we do a Christmas series every year. It's really hard, I think, inside of that. Like we're always trying to get creative of how do you tell the same story.
Same story for the 18th straight year.
Yeah. And so we're always trying to be creative in that. And I think we're getting better. I think our teaching team, it would sound bad if either previous teaching pastors were listening to this, but I think our teaching team knows because we were all on staff in different roles before we became a campus pastor. And so then the lead pastor was a campus pastor, but and a teaching pastor before he stepped into the lead pastor role. He founded the church, but God founded the church. He used Jim to do that. I don't know how do you say that, but that's many things. So anyway, we don't really have tons of traditions. We just try and be creative, stay true to Scripture, of course, and navigate through that.
Yeah. I was surprised in my church growing up. We had our Christmas traditions, like I told you, the big show that we did, and then a candlelight Christmas Eve service, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But then I came out to the East Coast for college and going to a lot of small churches for the first time in my life, growing up in a very large church. And they did the Advent calendar, the Advent wreath, and each week looking at a different candle in the wreath and lighting the candle. And I thought that was only something that Catholic churches did.
I'm so glad you said that. I mean, that's really, Melissa and I in the last 2 or 3 years have really engaged. Thanks for saying that, because I was thinking that same thing. And so I want to hear your story and what you do that. But I was thinking the same thing, and I don't know, Bruce, where you were in that, but that's where we were in this whole thing of very Catholic Presbyterian in its kind of feel, and then we started to lean into what it is, and we've done Advent for probably the last 4 years.
Yeah, I
so.
love it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. And in the churches that I've led here since then, it's something that I've incorporated into our worship service because I think that it brings great focus and great meaning and a great outline for the month of December and leading in, and just something that I had never experienced before.
Yeah.
I'm the same. I didn't grow up in a church that even knew there was Advent. And as I grew and learned about Advent, I started to incorporate it into the programs of the church. And people find more meaning just by going through and being reminded of the story. It's not changing the story, but sometimes we just need to remember parts of the story that were significant. And we're doing it again this year where I am, and we're doing it in different ways, but we're taking that the story and in basically in a 4-week period of time, celebrating it, so that people don't forget what the season's all about. They can come to church and not get it, but if you have the Advent bringing it gradually to them every time, I think it helps them to really celebrate what's going on. Christ is born.
So how do you balance those traditional things that churches have done for centuries, and at the same time, because it is something that is done every 11th month, how do you balance those traditional aspects and still bring new, fresh, innovative ideas to your church to celebrate in the Christmas season?
I think the thing that, go ahead, Bruce. You got something there?
Yeah, I was going to say it's the same as preaching sermons. How do you balance 52 weeks a year having a sermon about the same message about the gospel and the scriptures and things, and so we're finding unique ways to bring the truth, and I think that we never tire of doing this. Robert talked about 2,500 times he's going to watch shows or something, and he'll probably never tire of it. He may be institutionalized, but he will never tire. He'll never tire of watching those videos.
Yeah, and I think that's it. You talk about, like, I grew up in a pretty traditional church. Like, Central is by far anything but traditional. I mean, so where you grew up, Tony, and what you experienced in church, even as a as a teenager and a young pastor and things, was very, very different than mine. But lots of Christmas cantatas and things, and I don't like. I mean, I loved that, and it was a great part of my life. And I don't look back and go, I got robbed or something like that. I really enjoyed those things. But I'm in a phase of life now where I'm going, I don't know anybody that really gets in their car and listens to choir music. I mean, it just listens to a choir, and they go, this is
Bruce
great.
does.
Bruce is the one, but it's just, I don't know a lot of people my age, I should say. And,
Bruce goes to Dollywood, and the thing that he's most looking forward to is the Kingdom Airs.
Dude, every time I'm there, I go listen to him.
Do you really?
I do.
I've had season passes for like 38 years and have never seen the Kingdom Airs.
You and I both boycotted this year. It's our first year of boycotting in a while. I mean, Melissa and I, and Landon may be playing there next year. So, like, my oldest son may be, there's a guy that's down there, and Landon's going to start playing some music, so I may have to buy passes again. But yeah, it's, I'll go every time. I love it. I grew up on quartet music, and I love those things, and it's a big part of my life. I understand, I think, a lot about music, and there's times where Landon, as a musician, he asks things, and he's like, "How did you get to this knowledge? How did you get this?" And I said, "Quartets."
Hold on a second, Robert, because I've got a problem here. we're going to go down. We're going to
rabbit hole, people.
We're going down a rabbit hole here. You say music is a big part of your life.
Yes,
and yet, when we got out of the cars today, I asked you a very simple trivia question.
You asked me a question about what band was it, though?
What band was it?
I don't know. I don't have a clue.
It was Jars of Clay. Crazy Times, their sophomore album, 1996, 97, maybe.
I would have still been in a phase of life at that point in time where I was kind of transitioning out of that world. Like, I literally grew up in a world, and like, y'all, like, I'm not being funny when I say this. This is really my life. It was a King James only, Southern gospel only, suit and tie. You didn't listen to anything. Like, we listened to, most of the time, we were listening to the next cantata that we were doing in the car or a quartet. So, like, the only songs I knew until I could drive myself were mountain music, because I grew up in Alabama, and some other Alabama. Oh, and I don't know, not the Pledge of Allegiance. God Bless America or something like that. That would not have been really a national anthem.
Then you got your driver's license. You got your own car,
and I listened to Garth Brooks. I mean.
Wow.
Look, I grew up on country music, and it was definitely like Southern gospel, country music, those types of things and stuff. And for me, and so there's a lot. Melissa and Landon will say songs all the time, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. They're like, Robert, that's like Bon Jovi, and I'm going, I know 4 songs from Bon Jovi, and I just don't know. I do know a lot more Bon Jovi. He's not a good example, but that's I don't know a lot of songs.
Robert, I think that is a perfect transition into our next segment of the show.
The Headline News, where Bruce, Robert, and Tony search the world over for the top headlines relevant to the Small Church podcast, and then talk about it. And now Headline News.
So I said Pastor's Picks, but it's actually Headline News. And so you reached out this week, Tony, and you said, hey, guys, I'm kind of digging through the interwebs, and I'm looking at just what's out there. And nothing's really, like, smacking me in the face. Like, there's some stuff out here, but nothing is just there.
Yeah.
And you said, hey, what ideas do you have? And so I started digging and looking through, and I came across this article that says 5 reasons preachers should listen to hip hop. And I sent that to you along with like one other article. And I'm going, he is going to laugh himself to death. And you came in and said, we're doing
saw
this
the
one.
link and literally laughed out loud.
So that's the thing. 5 reasons preachers should listen to hip hop. Go, Tony.
Wow, where to begin? Thanks for just handing that off to me. So I read this article, and so I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and in my middle school and high school days, I absolutely loved hip-hop music, loved rap music. In fact, I would say I'm the only one of the 3 of us who has been to a rap concert in the last 6 months.
In the last 6 months, yes, but I have actually been to a rap concert.
Bruce, you've been to a rap concert in the last 6 months?
What's a rap concert?
He's
He
like,
thought
"Is
you
it
said
Christmas?
rat
We're
concert."
going
He thought
to
it-
rap presents?
He thought it was the hairband from the 80s. He thought it was a rat concert. He didn't know what it was.
No, but we're getting ready to go to a Sandy Patty concert. Concert, so.
That's about as far away from hip-hop as you can get right there.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway.
So I read this article and it triggered something for me. So I enjoy hip hop music. I grew up on rap music. Took the boys to see NF in Nashville a couple months ago, and so my boys love it. We're very intentional about what we allow them to listen to with that. And NF we love. He's great, and I actually enjoyed the concert. Thought it was a great time. But I read this article and it felt like, to me, someone trying to justify their love of rap music, that maybe they'd gotten in some trouble. And it reminded me that when I was a freshman in college at Milligan University, we had a guy who was very, very influential in my life. He was our campus pastor. His name was Wes Dillon. And Bruce, you'll remember Wes very well.
I remember Wes. Mm-hmm.
And I loved Wes. Very, very influential in my life. And Wes not only was our campus minister at Milligan at the time, but he was also the resident director of the dorm that I lived in. Wes had come to Milligan at the same time as I did, where he had previously been in Las Vegas and been a preaching intern at my church. So both of us coming, him in a leadership role, going to seminary while he was also working as the campus minister in RD, and me as a freshman. And so he would have us, he had a little apartment in the basement of our dorm, and he would have me and some of my friends down every week just because we were homesick. We've talked about that before on the podcast. And every Thursday he would have us down. He was the only room in the dorm that had cable TV other than the lobby. And so we would go into Wes's room to watch cable, and every Thursday at 10 o'clock we would gather to watch South Park. And word got out that we're watching South Park in the campus minister and resident director's apartment on campus, and some people started complaining about it. And so Wes wrote an article in the Stampede, the Milligan newsletter, the Milligan newspaper, defending South Park and how South Park was good for Christians to watch and consume. And even me, being one of the ones that was in there watching the show, was like, this is ridiculous, man. You're just making this look even worse. And Wes, I don't know where you're at nowadays, but if you happen to be listening to the Small Church Podcast, sorry for just throwing you under the bus right there. But that was ridiculous. And that's kind of the feeling that I got reading this article, was this guy's just trying to justify his love for rap music, which I don't think there's any need to justify it.
Well, but I think the one thing I would say in this is so he had 5 points. He said, one, metaphors. He referenced a book called The Artist's Way of Preaching, Charles Dennison wrote. And just kind of a quote, I said, most people do not read poetry, but the preacher should. And so he had this thing. So he talked about 1, metaphors. He talked about 2, concise and compelling sound bites. Rap music is typically in these 16 bars, and it works, and it's got this rhythm, and he talks about the cadence of it. He even references John MacArthur in there, and how that kind of plays to, John's a very sampled pastor inside of Christian hip-hop artists and things like that. They take John and they just sample him, and then they, of course, do their thing over top of that. Translating theology, that one there was a touch of a reach for me, and then authenticity. And the thing I'll say is I don't disagree. The article was what it was, but I think the point is interesting because there's 2 or 3 pastors that I listen to, and when I listen to them, that they have this rhythm. They have this rhythmical way, and it's what, like, their bottom lines and these thoughts and these ideas have this cadence to them. They have like this really, they rhyme well. They're very poetic. They're very hip hoppy in their thoughts. And so like I hadn't like connected the thought. And so I'll probably start reading a little more poetry. I'm not a huge hip hop fan. Like, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince is about as like
Parents just don't understand.
they don't, man. And so I still think I
That
wish
song
they would,
hits a little different now that we're parents.
way different. I think that like they still should only play the TV version of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. The real version is just way too long. But I mean that kind of stuff. The concert I went to was Ludacris back in the day. So I mean that was like 16, 17 years ago. I went to a Ludacris show, but I didn't stay the whole time. But it was just one of those things of like I don't. It's not my favorite style of music. There's some parts of it I can enjoy. I think Eminem's incredibly, incredibly gifted, and I actually don't listen to him on purpose because he draws me in. There's a couple of seasons of my life that I'm going, oh, I can handle this, and I can't. And people can think of me what they want. I think sometimes that's the best thing, is being self-aware of what can I do or not do. But I've seen like Lecrae, KJ52, John Rubin, guys like that. Had a chance to sit with some of them.
I have
and
a
listen.
John Rubin story if you want to hear it.
I'd love to hear it. I have a KJ52 John Rubin story as well.
Sometimes I think that this story is actually a great lesson. I've used it before in teachings for the way that we can let the crowd influence us. That I was at, this would have been back in 2002, 2003 maybe, and I was a youth pastor and had taken my whole team to the Youth Specialties National Youth Workers Convention.
Love YS.
Which used to be
amazing. I don't know what it is anymore.
This incredible thing.
Yeah.
And John Rubin was at the peak of his popularity, which was never very peaked, but he had his Rubin, what are you dippity doing? I just pulled that out of the top of my head. I told you the way that my mind works.
I'm John Rubin from the land of Conan and Columbus, Ohio was where I was born. And by my mom, Kathleen, on January 14, 1979, I entered the scene looking like, hello, mother, girl, what's going on? One moment, I'll be here. And anyway, yeah.
Wow, that's impressive.
It's
But
John
so
Rubin.
we're in this. He did one of the late night concerts, which started at like 11 o'clock, and the place is packed. I mean, we're talking probably 1,500, 2,000 youth pastors in this room.
I thought you were going to say 15 to 20 youth pastors.
The place was absolutely packed, and he's up on stage doing his thing. Me and my team are probably 2/3 of the way back, somewhere in the middle. It's just a complete sea of people. There's no seats. It's just standing room only, and someone starts chanting in the crowd. And again, this is a room full of youth pastors, okay? And he's doing his song. He's up on stage performing. And before I know it, we're all caught up. The whole place is chanting, get off stage, get off stage, get up. And I'm not even paying attention to what I'm yelling. Everyone's yelling it, so I'm just yelling it. John stops the concert, stops mid-song. And he's like choked up and has tears in his eyes. And he just looks and sits there for a minute, and everyone's chanting, get off stage, and he just breaks down and says, I'm heartbroken right now. He said, I don't get paid to be here. They don't pay me to come and do this. I'm doing this because I value what you guys do in serving and trying to lead the youth of our nation to Christ. And you're sitting here as I'm trying to share my gift with you guys because I value you, and a room full of 1,000 pastors is booing me and telling me to get off of the stage. He said, you guys need to check yourselves and look at what's in your hearts. And he set the mic down and walked off the stage. He said, I'll give you what you want, and walked off the stage.
So what was, we're in a way, and I'm not going to share my story. Mine's not necessarily a great thing, but what's the response at that point in time?
It was dead silence,
as it should have been.
And I can remember walking back out of the convention center and getting back to the hotel and talking with my team and being like, in all honesty, I thought that it was something that maybe he started a chant. I honestly in full transparency, didn't realize what I was saying. I just got caught up in the moment of the crowd, but saying, I need to send him an apology. I need to write him a letter, shoot him an email, and send him an apology, because that was ridiculous. And the Tick from YS addressed it
I love Tick.
the next morning. In the morning thing, he addressed what happened last night, and he said how disappointed he was in everyone who was there, and it cut. It cut.
Yeah, I love Tick, and it's just, yeah, that's a hard thing. So, well, I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know how we.
And now
recover
back to
from that.
Christmas.
I don't know how we recover from that.
Just
And
hear
so-
those sleigh bells jingling, ring ting tingling.
But yeah, I think hip hop's interesting, and if hip hop's not your thing, I think at least reading some poetry, grab Where the Sidewalk Ends and something like that, and read some poetry.
Shel
And
Silverstein.
I love that book.
Me too.
Sick is one of my favorite poems. Ever. I mean, and I know that's silly, but I just fell in love with that when I was in like third grade.
Absolutely.
And I still love so many things from that. So anyway, play our outro, whatever thingy, and that was fun.
There we go.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I've ever heard.
So fitting.
That hits a little different right
In your
now.
rambling, incoherent response, were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought? Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. And may God have mercy on your soul.
Headline news.
Yeah, that hits a little different.
That was perfect right there.
It was. So that's one of my favorite lines from Billy Madison. I love that moment. I quote it often, and most people don't get it, but I said it to you, and you're like, I know exactly what that is, and it was there. Hey, so I know Bruce talked a second ago, and he was talking about Christmas Eve services, and it's you kind of said to Christmas Eve service or not, and I think that's something that we have bounced a little bit, and for the most part in the last couple of years, our campus has done one. We've tried to be different. I mean, in some ways that we approach it. Sometimes it's just everybody comes in and sits in a row and faces forward, and we hand out battery-powered candles now, not the wax ones, and then we sit around and we kind of do something that's a little more, just a soft set. It's a lot of times a guitar and a cello, a violin, things like that, and so we kind of sit in a space where it's a little more reserved, kind of read some scripture, short teaching, some different things that we kind of work through in that space. I know Bruce talked about how valuable and beneficial it was. I think that, for my town where I'm at, it's still something that really, really, really gains a ton of traction and does really reaches our community well. Every time we do it, it's a really full house and just a great time to sit around and reflect on what we're about to step into. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of the same stuff. Like, hey, tonight we're sitting around and we're here and we're reflecting on baby Jesus, and we're reflecting on what God did for us in providing his son, for giving us hope. And then we go out and we try and remind everybody, don't go home and just get caught up in presents. But as soon as everybody walks out, they're sitting there going, man, I just need to go home and get stuff done. Instead of sitting here wishing something got done, I should be at home getting stuff done. And so it's a battle. And I think that that's something that's hard as a pastor. You want to, it's not on you, it's on the Holy Spirit to work. But I feel this pressure of, how do I sit a little differently with people? And how do we sit inside of the Spirit and sit inside of these moments where we get to just worship and hang it? And then this year, Christmas Eve is on Sunday. So it's always a thing of, do you do Christmas Eve? And I mean, how do you do this? Do you do Christmas Eve service? Do you do Sunday morning? Do you do both? And, so for us in 2023, we're going to do our normal 2 services on Sunday morning, and that will function as our Christmas Eve.
Yeah, for me, we're talking about traditions earlier. Candlelight Christmas Eve service is without question my favorite Christmas tradition. Growing up, it was what we did every year, and very similar, even in a massive church like Central, very similar to what you just described you guys are doing, except we were given the actual wax candles, and as a little kid, me and my friends would sit in the back row, and we would see who could stand the heat of dripping the wax onto your hands the most, and by the time you're done, your entire hand is covered in wax. But even for a very progressive contemporary church, Christmas Eve service was really stripped down, singing old acoustic Christmas carols, and it was my absolute favorite tradition to this day. over Charlie Brown Christmas, over going and getting a Christmas tree, over decorating, over cookies and Christmas music and all of that. Candlelight Christmas Eve service, favorite Christmas tradition and favorite Christmas memory. When I was working in churches as an adult in Las Vegas, it was our biggest service of the year. People say Christmas and Easter. And for us, Christmas Eve service was the biggest service of the year because everybody celebrates Christmas. Not everyone celebrates Easter. Really, generally, only believers celebrate Easter. But everyone, for the most part, unless you're Jewish, celebrates Christmas. And at least out west, a big part of that tradition is going to a Christmas service, a Christmas Eve service. And so it was our highest attended service of the year. It was the biggest service of the year. And even though we stripped it way down, we put a lot of thought and intention into our Christmas Eve service. Then I come out here and working in churches here, and the vast majority of churches do not do it. And I was shocked here in the Bible Belt that the vast majority of them don't. And in talking with a lot of pastors, a lot of the reason that I got is because they want to be home with their families during that time and not doing church. And it's something that has always shocked me. A couple of years ago, my wife and I were a blended family, and so every other Christmas we don't have our kids on Christmas Eve. And I said I wanted to go to a candlelight midnight Christmas Eve mass at a Catholic church, something I'd never experienced before. And I said I wanted to go do that. We could not find one in the Tri-Cities. Really? We could not find one. Looked everywhere and couldn't find one to go to. And so I love hearing the things that you said, Robert, because I think that it's something that maybe is very geographical on whether or not. And I was just shocked at how little importance it was given here in our area in the Bible Belt.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the South, and we never went. Now, the thing I'll say is that my parents' families were from Virginia, and so living in Alabama, we traveled to Virginia, and so we were always with family, and that was my mom's family. That was the big night. That's what we did. And so there was, 40 of us that were circled up at my grandparents' house, and it was, a very traditional Christmas, Thanksgiving-ish type meal, and we just kind of lived in that space. And so, but yeah, I never remember. And when those things started happening, I remember going, well, this is cool. This is kind of neat. And I mean, it was actually a church in Northeast Tennessee when I was at was the first time we ever went to one. And it was like our first time I went to one. I think Melissa had probably been with them before, but it was something that was special and meant a lot. And I was thankful to kind of be able to be a part of that. So yeah, I really enjoy them. I'm glad we do them. Things like, we talked about it at the Thanksgiving podcast, when we do things like serving meals on Thanksgiving morning, or we do something like Christmas Eve, when you take a job as a pastor, you take a job as a lineman working for an electric company, when there's a tornado, when there's a blizzard and the power's out, you just have to assume, regardless of what day it is, what time it is, what's going on, you've got to go out and do. And I think it's a little, I don't know, this is harsh, man, and you can send all the hate mail to me on this one. I think it's a touch selfish to kind of go, I'd rather be with my family. And I value my family a ton, but I mean, maybe the church, maybe your church, maybe your leadership should go, hey, we're going to do a Christmas Eve service. Sit down with them. We're going to do a Christmas Eve service. What if I get a couple of days after Christmas that don't count towards my vacation or something? Or what if we took a couple of days here? Or we kind of spent some time, and I've bounced a million different ways, and we'll talk about this, a little more in a minute, but on, what should we, what happens here? Should we do church this way or that way? Or should we do church at all at this point in time, when Christmas lands and hits in certain spaces? But yeah, no, I'm with you. And I just think we got to be focused on the fact that we get very few opportunities that people are willing to show up, and especially something like this year where Christmas Eve is hitting on a Sunday, and we get a chance for people who are going to have relatives in town. It's a Sunday morning. There's not as much going on Sunday morning as Christmas Eve. I know there's shopping that needs to get done, but stores aren't going to be open at 7 a.m. on a Sunday. Maybe they will be. I don't know, but they're not going to be open as early on a Sunday morning. I just think there's this space where even if it's just our Sunday morning, which is all we're doing, we're not doing a Sunday night Christmas Eve thing, and doing Sunday morning as well. But we'll sit in that space and we will rest, and we'll do something probably it's a touch shorter. We're usually about 65 minutes. We'll probably be 45 to 50. and we'll rest in that space and we'll just reflect inside of who Jesus is. I mean, we go see my mom every Christmas, and we read the Bible. We read the birth while we're driving down the road. All of my boys open up their Bibles on their their YouVersion app, and we read those things. And so those traditions, those things, that rhythm is something I think that's just so important. And so I love Christmas Eve. I love what we get to do, love how we get to be a part of that in our community, and it's awesome.
And it can be difficult in a small church. If you're already looking at your normal Sunday attendances, only 30, 40 people, 20 people, maybe for some of our listeners, and Christmas Eve, that you're only going to have, it may only be you and your family sitting there. It can be a difficult decision to say, would I rather invest this time in my family being home? But I think my personal opinion is the message that sends to your kids that, hey, this is why we are celebrating. This isn't about unwrapping presents. This isn't about eggnog. This isn't about turkey dinners. This is about the coming into the world of our Lord and Savior, that even if it's only us and 3 of our closest friends sitting here doing this on Christmas Eve, we are pausing in the midst of the chaos to reflect and remember really why we're doing this.
I think it's a hard time too in culture, and then I know we got some other stuff to do, and we're kind of getting a little long on this probably, but I think in culture too now we're seeing so many more families, and I think in the first time when you said we had to re-record this thing, I was talking about the fact that I get like 4 Sundays a year that I can take off and just not be at church on a Sunday, and right now in my life those are typically at a sporting event, and it's for my kids. I mean, it's not like we're going to watch the Braves play or something like that. I mean,
why would anyone want to go watch the Braves play unless they're playing the Dodgers?
Yeah, because they love the Lord and the baseball. That is why they would want to go. And but we can argue that point later. But I was at a travel soccer tournament in North Carolina, and we're sitting around and kind of doing these things. And I think in this world and society where people just aren't, because most people are like, my kids signed up and, I work for the town, or I work for the school system, or I work at the power company, or, I have work at the bank. They're going to miss 26 times a year because their kids playing travel baseball in the summer and travel basketball in the fall and travel soccer in the spring. And and they're going to miss all the time. And it's just half the year they're going to be gone. And we're already seeing that even with the Christmas Eve thing. People who've always been super, super committed, like, man, Sunday morning, 2 services, Christmas Eve, we probably aren't going to be there. And, and you take a church of 115 people, like I said, then all of a sudden you strip that down, you're going to have 60 people sitting in 2 services. But, we've got to do kind of the thing that I think God's called us to inside of that space. And it requires me as a pastor, like you said, just to sacrifice and go, this is a worthy cause of sacrificing for. And that's helping people to lean into the hope of Jesus. And this is a time where people are sensitive to that. And I think it's important. So.
That's great. All right, well, we need to move on, and we're going to go to our next segment of the show, which is one of our favorites, Pastor's Picks.
Are we reading? What are we watching? What are we listening to? Does anyone really care? Probably not, but we will tell you anyways.
All right, so it is time for Pastor's Picks. What are we reading? What are we watching? What are we listening to? Bruce, we'll kick it off with you. What are you reading this week?
I've been reading for a few weeks a book called Faithfully Different by Natasha Crane, and it's about the change in our culture, and when our culture confronts Christianity, the misunderstandings of things that take place. And so it's you may think you're not going to encounter somebody as a Christian. You're not going to encounter somebody who's definitely not a Christian or opposed to Christianity. But I would say wake up and smell the roses, because the culture we're in, Christians are becoming a minority, not a majority. And so that book has given me some ideas and thoughts of communicationally and faith-wise how to address those kind of situations. And then I've also, Robert's mentioned before, Dr. Josh Mulvihill. Mulvihill, whatever the hill, I don't know how it's pronounced, Mulvihill. And it's about grandparenting. And I've been teaching a class at church on grandparenting and being intentional. And it's helping me in my own life and my own faith. What kind of a grandparent was I? I'd ask that question. And I wasn't a really good parent, really. I would say I was coaching baseball for my son, or softball for my girls, or basketball, and I was always doing those kind of things, and not really giving the spiritual help, even as I was preaching. But they learned more about sports from me. They learned the spiritual part from Carol, and so we're in a culture where we're going to be confronted, and we're in a culture where there's going to be temptations and things. How good are we intentionally in our relationships, our family, with our church, with our friends? How, I don't mean go up to everybody and quote scripture to them and hold the Bible upside your head and hit them with it, but I do mean how intentional are we? I'm having to be more intentional with my children, because I wasn't intentional before. And that's in order to really address my grandchildren. And I'm learning a lot from Josh's book, but this other book is making me think. So those are two I would look at.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Bruce.
Yeah, that's so good.
Robert, what are you listening to right now?
Listening to, still the same couple of podcasts in that space. I'm saving all my energy so that when I win a competition, I get to watch 25 movies that I'm listening and watching
Should have
Christmas
asked you,
movies.
what are you watching?
No, you're good. I'm saving all my energy. I know it's not, I mean, again, I wouldn't listen to this with always the kids in a car, but Bill Simmons has the Rewatchables podcast, and I just love films. I love hearing, and they dive into kind of the why behind and a lot of things like that. And I was even, rewatching an old show from the 90s right now, and Melissa and I were talking this morning, and I said, man, you look at things that are going on in our world, and you look at how, kind of something people in uproar for, you look at how this show, and this is the generation that seems to be a part of the, I don't know, I don't say a problem or a part of the thought, like what they had watched. And so I love the Rewatchables. It's a great, they're doing, they did a thing in November, 80s movies that made how much, and it was just movies that really kind of made a ton, that weren't expected. And so, yeah, love them, love what they're doing there. And then I really do like Theology in the Raw with Preston Sprinkle. Just like to sit inside of that.
Yeah, that's great.
What about you? What you watching?
Watching. What am I watching? Watching a lot of NBA basketball right now.
We are too.
We broke down and got NBA League Pass.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of basketball in our house. Also, just watched the Hulu documentary on Hillsong.
I watched that a while back.
And really, the focus on Carl Lentz and kind of his thing. And I don't want to get too much into it right now because we're running long on time already, and we've got some more to touch on. But I thought it was really sad the way that scandal sells, and they didn't focus. I felt bad for Carl and his family in that, watching that, and someone who works with broken pastors a lot, someone who has been a broken pastor, just my heart broke for him and for his wife and his kids, and the way that they were portrayed in that, even bringing him back at the end, and just wish that they had focused on some of the positive things that happened at Hillsong. And regardless of your views on that, every guest that they had was just, let's beat this scandal into the dirt. And it was hard to watch. It was a difficult watch. And maybe we'll talk about that some more another time. But a lot of sports, a lot of documentaries, that kind of sums up what I've been watching lately. And that was your pastor's picks. All right, so we're going to move right on in our discussion on Christmas. And Robert, you kind of touched a little bit on this with that Christmas Eve this year is on a Sunday night. And so how do churches address that? Do you do service on Sunday morning? Do you hold off and just do a Christmas Eve service on Sunday night? Last year, Christmas Day was on a Sunday, and there was so much controversy in the church leadership world about to have church, to not have church. And I'm seeing a lot of those same conversations this year in relation to Christmas Eve being on a Sunday. And you talked a little bit about how you guys are handling that this year with Christmas Eve. How did you guys handle that last year with Christmas being on a Sunday? And are there any special considerations for planning services or activities on Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, when the holiday falls on traditional church Sunday?
Man, this is terrible. I remember a ton of conversation, and don't like my church might, if anybody from my church is listening to this, they can tell me if I'm wrong later, and we'll fix it. I am 99.9% sure that last year in 2022, when Christmas was on a Sunday, we did Christmas Eve service, and we did not do Sunday morning. That was a long conversation. I feel like that's what we did. I could be wrong. And because my mind now, because we went back and forth, and we've had, because I've sat in a lot of different spaces. There's some big churches around that they're volunteers. They feel like they work really, really hard. And so they take a Sunday off a year. And I've been in those spaces where it's like, hey, let's take a Sunday off. Or I've been in those spaces where, there's 13 weeks in a quarter. Let's take that 13th week off every quarter. I've been in, and like I said, we've never done that and stuff, but I've kind of been in like, okay, what would it look like to do this, to let people rest? Because in a small church, your people are like every week, it's go time. And so I guess where they're drowning a little bit. But then there's always the conversation of there's somebody, especially in a staff like we've got with a larger staff, that is going, man, we need to, these are the moments though. People are at church. We got to be there. We got to be there. We got to be there. And so I think the conversations have always been good. For the most part, we do something on Sundays regardless. I just feel like last year, for some reason in 2022, that we did not. But yeah, so I'm probably more of a fan now of make it happen. If it's, me and my three, then that's what it is.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting after what I just said about Christmas Eve in our last segment on it, that I'm a bit of a hypocrite because every so many years when Christmas Day falls on a Sunday, I was the lead pastor of a church. I didn't have services.
Yeah.
That was family time. And after everything that I just said about Christmas Eve service and it frustrating me with the churches that don't do Christmas Eve services and the pastor saying it's because they're family time, then I'm so hypocritical and turning around. And that was kind of my thought on Christmas Day. And definitely, I don't think it was necessarily the right choice. But I think for me, it really kind of came down to nobody's going to come. But I just had the conversation of, so what if it's only you and your family, what you're showing your kids in that. And I never did that. So,
well, and I think, inside of that space, like something that's hard is my family, we have never really done like Santa Claus and like gifts and things like that on Christmas Day. We started kind of early, and we just always did kind of a family gift. Part of that in the last 10 years, 12 years has been we buy a couple of puzzles. Those usually get there really early. We'll go get pictures with Santa. We talk about Santa. We do all those things, but we've always approached Saint Nick from the real person he was that like lived overseas, not the magical guy that floats around and do. Had nothing to do with it. We were concerned if our kids believed in Santa, they wouldn't believe in Jesus. Had nothing to do about all the things that people worry about. It's just the fact of that we wanted to shift it to Jesus. And so for us, there wasn't all the big hoopla of a Christmas morning, and we've always had to travel to somewhere.
Yeah.
So we've got parents that, are alive in other spaces and things like that. So we've always had to get in a car and go. So for us, Sunday morning was just something like, okay, let's go to church. And so I've never, it's not a big thing, but anyway, there we go.
Bruce, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm old enough in the churches when we came to Christmas time, the thought really never came into my mind of not having church and taking the day off. I thought that was going to be the best day of the year for things, and we always had to travel. And if we were going to take the day off, we were going to take 3 or 4 days off to get home and get to both our families and get back. And I really looked at the churches who didn't have church on Sunday or hesitating to have church and taking the day off. I always looked down at them and thought, there's other days you can take off to make up for it. And the times I've gone to those kind of services, they've been pretty well packed. And but is packed and not packed the criteria? Or are we there? Are we faithfully doing what we need to do? And when was the baseball movie? Bill, they'll come. Offer the service, they'll come. And if they don't come, what have you lost?
Yeah, I mean, and there's definitely that, Field of Dreams, I think, Bruce, mentality with some of this stuff of just, if you're not present, there's no chance. And I don't know. I don't know where, there's a great balance there. There's a lot of conversations. And honestly, I don't know what's right or wrong, because, I mean, I think church is important, or I wouldn't be pastoring and leading in one. But yeah, the body of Christ, and how are we sitting in our community, which I know we're going to talk about in a minute. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and so really we've given you absolutely nothing there, except a bunch of
same struggles
thoughts and
I think that
ideas.
they're going through. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, here's where we've
Yeah.
been. We've all struggled. I've been in 3 different places with it in my life. Literally, I've been in 3 different emotional places in the last 10 years in that space, emotional, mental, spiritual places. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, and so with that, we're going to transition into everyone's favorite segment of the show. We debuted this last week. It is time for signs.
This was me reading the sign.
Which was my sign? Here's your sign.
Our sign this week actually came to us from a listener. This one I think is great. It says, "The fact that there's a highway to hell and only a stairway to heaven says a lot about anticipated traffic numbers."
So I just noticed something, and I thought about it last week, and I'm 99% confident. I think it's hilarious that you have Larry the Cable Guy saying, "Here's your sign."
That would be Bill Enville.
That wasn't Bill. That's Larry the Cable Guy saying that.
I pulled the clip directly off of Bill.
He sounds just like Larry the Cable Guy.
Would you like to hear it again?
No. I'm good. But because there's a couple of segments where Larry does those with him, and it sounds like Larry, not Bill.
I actually attended the Blue Collar Comedy Tour.
I think it's hilarious. I still watch it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it has not aged well, by the way.
It hasn't at all.
It has not. I mean, it's one of those things. I don't know how I don't know what they thought. But
I actually quoted it to my wife the other day, and she looked at me like, "You are an idiot."
Yeah. Now, my wife's had to watch that way more than she wants to.
I wasn't drunk in public. I was drunk in a bar, and they threw me into public.
I had the
You
right
probably
to
just
remain
butchered
silent, but I didn't have the ability. That's he's I do, yeah. I mean, yeah, I love those guys. But it sounds so much like Larry the Cable Guy. It does not sound like Bill Engvall.
When we're done recording, I will play it for you again, and we can debate
It's
this.
all good. Hey, let's finish this thing up, because people have, if you're still hanging on, you're a saint. I mean, literally, you're one of the greatest people in the world. Community engagement. We do a really cool thing in our community. I was on a podcast.
You're on one right now.
I was on a Zoom call a few weeks ago, and it'll be coming up here in a few weeks. We do it the Wednesday before Christmas every year, and they do a live nativity scene. And again, small town. Our entire town is not like 3 normal city blocks. It's like 3 small town city blocks long, and so it's like 3 traffic lights long, and they start at one end, and there's somebody who there's camels and donkeys and all this stuff, and the kids all dress up as angels, and people have all these things, and they carry stuff, and they walk down the street, and they sing Christmas carols as they walk down the street, and it ends at a First Baptist church there at the end of the street. Like 10 churches come together to partner together and do this thing, but it ends there. And First Baptist is this, I don't know, 1800, started in 1800s or something. I mean, late 1800s. It's this gorgeous, huge church, and I love their building. And we can see them from our front door. But they do hot chocolate. There's a band though. Like Gary and I, our worship pastor, he and I led worship there one year. And I mean, you stand outside and everybody comes up, and there's different pastors will pray and read portions of scripture and things. And I just love that community space. And it's another way that I think we have really unique stuff, that it's just some people laid some groundwork years ago that I get to really reap the benefits of just continuing in that path. We also do, every year, we have a different way kind of through Thanksgiving and Christmas that we connect with the community just for people in need. So this year I got a call from a member of our church, works with a local high school, said, "I got 500 kids that is somewhat like an angel tree, 500 kids in our middle school and high school that just need help. I mean, this high school has 750 kids in it. So you're talking 1,200 kids. I've got 500 names. And she called me and she said, hey, I've got 500. And I said, I need to check to make sure somebody else hasn't booked us for something. And by the time I called her back a day later, we texted and she said, I'm down to 15. I said, we'll take them all. And so we get a chance. And man, I tell my friends and tell our house all the time there that you guys do so much that I can't comprehend, because from late October through Christmas Day, it is no less than 7 things that we ask them to show up to give towards, above and beyond. And some of those are pretty lofty things. So those are some cool things we get to do. That's how we engage our community, and it's really allowed us to just be a big part of what's going on.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that I would say, if you're a listener and you're a small church leader right now, or just a church leader in general, and your church doesn't do anything around the Christmas season to serve your community, serve underprivileged, and engage your community, then you need to really check yourself, because there's no reason for it. There's so many opportunities out there through Operation Christmas Child, through the Christmas tree, the one that you just mentioned there.
Angel Tree.
Angel Tree,
yeah.
spacing on the name.
Yeah.
There are so many different ways that require so little work and effort and cost on your part that your congregation can get involved and make a real difference in the lives of people. That if you're not participating in anything like that, then you need to really, you've got time. If you're listening to this right now, there's still time to get involved in something.
Well, we had a member of our church come in a couple years ago and just in tears. I mean, we were in tears by the time she finished telling the story. And there was just a need, and kids didn't have coats. And we said, hey, we're going to do something crazy. If you have lightly used, they can't have holes in them, guys. Let's be kind. But there are this many kids. We called one elementary school, and we said, how can we partner with you? And they said, we have 50 kids that need coats. And this one church member had come in and said, hey, I've got this vision. And we said, what's your thoughts? And they said, could we do this? And so we called this one elementary school. The principal said, we have 50 kids at a minimum that could use coats. And we said, church, we need 50 coats. And literally over a 2-week period, we probably had double that. And it's just something so simple. You can go to Walmart and buy a coat. I mean, I don't know, maybe now a coat that was $25 2 years ago,
now.
125, yeah, at Walmart. But nonetheless, like, you can go in, and I mean, we had these moments and spaces. Like, I think actually those were 2 different things. Even like, we had another time we called that school back and we said, what could we do? And they said, we need this, this, and this, and these like 30 kids had given these lists, and they had given, because I remember reading one of the lists, and I said, look, you got to respect the game. This kid said, I want Spider-Man pajamas. I want a coat that buttons, not zips. I was like, don't buy that kid a coat that zips. And everybody laughed, and I said, like, this is a way, and it's probably 50, 60, 75 bucks a kid, that we had 40, 50 kids. I mean, we're a church of 100, like a little over 100 people, which means that by the time you take families, I'm a family of 5. If we're 100 people, we're not we're 96. I mean, you take me by myself and 4 other people get sucked in. And we have tons of large families like that. And in a church of probably 60 families, we had 40 things go out the door faster. Like, by the time I got out the door, I was walking, I was like, and they're like, they're gone. And I said, well, how do we, and they said, show up and deliver. And I mean, and it was one of those things, like, as a pastor, I just didn't take one. So, like, I'll grab one as I walk out the door, or grab 2. And God just does so much. So it's this little things. Call your local elementary school. Call your high school. Hey, we're a church of 10 people. There's not a lot we can, I mean, I don't know what we can do, but is there something 10 people could do to help a group of kids this year? And there's, yes, I'll promise you, there is a way. Talk to your local Rotary or Kiwanis clubs. They're always doing things, and Shop with a Cop and things like that. What can you do if all you can do is say, we can't do much, but we can show up to Shop with a Cop and we can walk through, we can help bag stuff up, we can do things, we can wrap gifts for the Kiwanis when they go out and do. There's so many organizations doing so much, and I don't care what town you're in. You've got a Rotary, you've got a Kiwanis, you've got, officers and, EMS and firefighters that are doing great things that you can jump in and be a part of and make a huge difference in your community, and people will see that.
Yeah, no excuse. Bruce, you got anything to add to that?
No, he covered it all.
Yeah, I did.
All right. Well, with that, we are going to say goodbye today to this edition of the Small Church Podcast. We want to thank you for listening in as we rambled a lot about Christmas and how you can be involved. Again, no reason for you to not be involved. We gave some great resources out there that you can connect with, some great organizations that you can partner with that do all of the heavy lifting for you. We talked about whether or not you should do Christmas Eve service, whether or not you should have Christmas on Sunday mornings when it falls on that date. What are some great traditions that we have and some great traditions that you have? We would love for you to connect with us on Facebook. Find us on Twitter, even though I don't know that any of us are really on Twitter, so maybe just scratch that. And you know what? Go ahead and subscribe to the Small Church. X that. That was great. Go ahead and subscribe to the Small Church Podcast because we would love for you to join us again next week. I don't know that you're going to want to, but we would love for you to. So have a great rest of your week and Merry Christmas.